Welcome everyone from the Dramatist Guild. Thanks for joining us. Our program today is called Wait, I Didn't Write That. Our discussion is actually co-sponsored by the Dramatist Guild and DG Copyright Management in recognition of Copyright Advocacy Month, which is the month we're celebrating this month at the Guild. I'm sure everyone knows what the DG is, but you may not know what the DGCM is, the DG Copyright Management. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about that. We are the estate consultancy and intellectual property management organization that was formed by the Guild to manage property that was owned or bequeathed to the Guild and its sister organization. So what that really means is we manage the works that are left to the Guild and to its sister organizations through one's will. What makes the DGCM a unique organization is that unlike other management organizations, we are a public benefit organization, which means that we have the goal of upholding your authorial intent. Other management companies might try to just maximize revenues. Of course, we always try to do that, but our work really does revolve around the author and what the author would have wanted for their work. At the DGCM, we also have the added benefit of a subcommittee of the Guild's Council that is charged with acting as your proxy. So when tough decisions come up about your work, you can be sure that the best and the brightest are making decisions on your behalf. I would welcome you all to visit us at www.thedgcm.org to learn more about the program. It's really an incredible way to give back to the Guild, to support the next generation of playwrights, relieve your heirs from the job of copyright management, which, as we're going to talk about today, is not always the easiest job, and know that we would always work with your attorney to find a plan that works well for you, whether you want to give a stream of income to a beneficiary or think about tax consequences. We just encourage you to take care of your properties as you would any of your other children that you've worked your whole life to grow. So just on to today's program. So like I was just talking about, authorial intent is really at the heart of what we do at the DGCM, and I think that's why it's so important that we have this conversation today. What happens when that intent is not upheld? What happens when changes are made to your work without your permission? We are going to dive into this question with Amanda Green and Doug Wright. Doug, by the way, is our DGCM president and also has enrolled an incredible property with the DGCM, but I'm not going to tell you which one. You can go to our website and check it out and be in awe, as we all are very grateful to him. So we're going to chat for about 40 minutes, and I will take questions at the end. Please use the Q&A function of Zoom if possible. But without further ado, I am going to introduce Cheryl Davis, who is the General Counsel for the Authors Guild. She's an attorney with more than 30 years of experience in the field of intellectual property. She litigated these disputes. So if anybody knows about what to do when you've been infringed, it's Cheryl Davis. She's also happens to be an award-winning playwright. So we are very, very grateful that she's with us here today. And I'm going to pass the baton on to her. So thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks so much, Deborah. And another one of my assorted titles is I'm on the board of the DLDF.
And on the board of the DLDF. Well, there you go. There isn't anyone better than Cheryl Davis to lead us through this.
Yeah, I am so happy and delighted and honored to be here. I am, as anybody who knows me knows, I am up for talking copyright anytime, any place. And I was very happy and ecstatic, in fact, to be taking part in this with these wonderful writers. And I'm going to give you just a snippet of their bios because they're extraordinarily impressive and detailed, but I'm just going to be brief here so we can get into the substance of the conversation. We have here Doug Wright, who's the president of the Dramatist Guild of America. Doug won the Tony Award for Best Play, as well as the Pulitzer Prize for Drama for his play, I Am My Own Wife. His play Quills garnered the 1995 Kesselring Prize for Best American Play from the National Arts Club, and he won a 1996 Village Voice Obie Award for Outstanding Achievement in Playwriting. He wrote the book for the musical Hands on a Hard Body with the score by Amanda Green and Trey Antanasio. His most recent Broadway musical, War Paint, starred Patti LuPone and Christine Ebersole. And here we have Amanda Green, who is a council member for the Dramatists Guild of America. She is the first woman to win the Frederick Loewe Award for Outstanding Composition from the Dramatists Guild. She received a Tony Award nomination for Best Score, 2 Drama Desk Award nominations for Music and Lyrics, and the Outer Critics Circle nomination for Best Score. Her shows include Hands on a Hard Body. She was the lyricist and co-composer with Trey and Doug Wright. So let us dig in. And can you please tell us, how have you as writers experienced infringement of your work?
A traumatic question, but a very one. And I think that Amanda and I shared an experience, but she was on the front line. So I think I'm gonna pass the baton to her and let her describe that experience to you.
Yes.
Is that cool, Amanda?
Totally. We have a shared experience, and then I unfortunately have another experience after this one. But we co-wrote Hands on a Hard Body, and I went to Houston to see the Texas premiere of Hands on a Hard Body, which is set in Texas. So I was very excited. It was at the Tuts Theater Under the Stars, and it was a professional production, and they were using the Broadway truck, which is a featured the set of our show, a truck. And very excited. I coordinated with the theater. They wanted me to do marketing, help them with marketing. I was thrilled to do anything, as I always am, to promote a show, no matter where it's being done. And I flew myself out, me and my husband, and I started watching the show. And right from the beginning, I mean, the opening number was going on, and then all of a sudden it was over and buttoned. And I was like, I thought this was a longer song. And I was like, okay, it's been a while. And then someone sang a song, and I was like, wait, didn't we switch that song? And then as it went on, it became more and more surreal to me, as all of a sudden, it's a contest where people are eliminated, and all of a sudden someone was singing a song, and I thought, oh, when they're done with this song, they're done. But they're not supposed to drop off into the second act. So what's going to happen? So by the time we got to the intermission, which ended with a song that we had as the third song in our, so I was, it was a surreal experience, and really just wild. And I texted Doug immediately and said, Doug, they are messing around with our show. It turns out that one of the original producers happened to be there, and she sat next to me, and she and I held hands and were gripping each other during Act 2, because it just went on and on. I mean, they switched everything, you know, who fell off where, what songs, they added music, they cut, you know, a third or a quarter or a half of songs that they felt like. It was absolutely mind-boggling. And I had a meet and greet with the director beforehand and with everybody, and they took pictures, and he said, I hope you'll come to the cast party. And I said, of course. And then when it was over, the director started walking towards me, and she said, just keep moving. Don't talk to him, keep moving. And I kept moving, and he followed me, and he goes, okay. I made a couple of changes, but you have to admit it's better. And I said, no, it's not. It's not better. And he was like, oh, well, you know, it was just a couple of changes. They were all modular. So if you want to move back, I can move it back. It's not a problem. I left. Doug was already up in arms and had enlisted, I think it was John Weidman and people who were writing to them. And as it turned out, it of course was not modular. I found out from a deep source who shall not be revealed, but who's, I will just say one of their students, so their teacher, was in the production, and she said, Amanda, from day one, this director walked in with a CD and a script. And he said, this is the order we're going to do it in. Here's a script. Let's think of this as a workshop. And it was his baby as far as he was concerned. And the people, all the actors were afraid to talk about it because it's one of the few professional theaters in Houston. And, you know, it's a small world, and you cause a fuss, you could be blackballed. So they didn't say anything. They went along with it. But we, you know, lots of letters went back and forth, and Doug and I discussed what our options were and what we felt that the right option was. He then said, okay, fine, I'll move it back. I'll switch it back. And we said, okay, switch it back. And then, you know, there were tales of them being up all night and trying to, you know, reassemble this jigsaw puzzle for a week's worth of performances. And we just said, no, shut it down. And that's what we ended up doing. And by the way, I mean, it got some good reviews or bad reviews. It's sort of immaterial. We shut it down. That was our power as writers. And that's what we did. Never something you want to do, but it was just a farce and a real trampling of our intentions and our work.
Cease and desist letter from the sheriff to close it down. It was all fairly dramatic.
Yes.
So many people out there probably know, but when the Guild was founded over 100 years ago, the reason that these writers came together to forge the Dramatist Guild was to protect copyright and to make sure that writers always owned the content of their work. And that makes us different from TV writers and film writers because we're not employees for hire, which also means we cannot unionize because we are independent contractors. We own our material. We're not employees, and only employees can unionize. So for copyright, we have given up union privileges like pensions and healthcare and things like that because of the belief that what we write is truly an extension of ourselves and that we own it in the marketplace. So we've made huge sacrifices to ensure that our work is always done as written. So when that is ignored in a cavalier way, we have every right to strike back.
Well said, exactly.
That is so true, Doug. And the difference between the Dramatist Guild and the Authors Guild, for that matter, any creative artist who wants to retain their copyright is different from those who are in the TV and film industry. And again, this is a wonderful thing that the Guild is here to support playwrights and doing things like this. Now, how did you go about shutting down the production? Did you contact your individual attorneys? I know you got John Weidman involved. Did the Guild play a role in that?
Very much so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, but as I recall, we worked with Ralph Sevish, the executive director of business affairs at the Guild, to effect the shutdown. Is my memory correct, Amanda?
That is, and a wonderful thing about the Guild is, you know, even and in a case like this, you know, writers, you make in theater, you make a killing, but it's very hard to make a living, and we did not have to pay out of our own pocket to affect this change. It was through Ralph and the Dramatist Guild that it happened. So we did not have to hire lawyers or hire our lawyers to do this work, for which I'm very grateful.
I'm sure you are.
Yes.
And while it's awful what happened to you, it is good that you were able to act to protect your rights under this.
Absolutely.
Now, Amanda, you mentioned another incident?
Yeah, this one was in London. It was last year. This young theater company called the Turbine Theater was doing a production of my first musical, High Fidelity, which is based on a British novel that the writers and I then transplanted to Brooklyn. And our musical took place in Brooklyn, and them being in England, they asked us, and it was very last minute, like, we're doing it in 2 months. Can we hire this woman who's a comedian named Vicky Stone, who's, well, it's too late to say she shall remain nameless. Anyway, Vicky Stone to sort of anglicize the references and the lyrics in the book, and we all said fine. And yes, and will we have the last word? Yes, you will. You'll have approval. And her rewrites came back, and the book writer David Lindsay-Abaire, another Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, was not happy with the book, but he was like, oh, whatever. And the lyrics, I just was appalled. I was appalled. They didn't, I like a stickler for perfect rhymes. It didn't rhyme. It wasn't funny. It wasn't, not every, she made small and big decisions that I was quite unhappy with. and including the cutting several songs. And I was like, no. And the composer was like, no. And they were really dopey too. Like there's a song called I Slept With Someone Who Slept With Lyle Lovett. And she said, British people don't know who Lyle Lovett is. This is a tiny guy, you know, he works in a small town in this record store. And I said, yes, but he's a record store owner. And I didn't come up with the name Lyle Lovett. Nick Hornby, the author, did. I'm only using, but she wanted to cut the whole thing. So we had an argument back and forth, and I ended up rewriting her rewrites and anglicizing them. And then, but I could never get straight answer from them. They never restored a song that we asked to be restored. She publicly took credit for rewrites I did. It was the producer just sort of lied to us about what was changed and what wasn't. It was a really painful situation, and in that case, it was opening in London, and it got pretty good reviews. And they credited this woman, which was like galling to my ego and pride. But we talked it over, and I talked to Doug, and I talked to the Guild, and like my recourse was to shut that show down. And it would not benefit me to shut that show down. You know, I wanted it to, I went to see it, and while her changes were galling, it didn't ruin the show. I am not happy with the situation, but it would have been shooting myself in the foot to shut them down. I just have to be, you know, a word to the wise. And again, he shall remain nameless. Paul Taylor Mills in the UK, watch out for him. He's an up and coming guy, and he does not respect writers. You will find those people. So it is a case by case basis. And in some cases, you sort of have to go, well, it's better to have the show open and not, I mean, shutting it down would only, you know, nobody would win in that case. So
in the case of the experience at Tuts, I'll just add, the one in Texas, we did hear from other writers, like Lin-Manuel Miranda, that the same theater had done his work and had made significant alterations, and that in fact we had uncovered what seemed to be a pathological problem with this artistic director. And I'm proud to say that the Guild had ongoing conversations with their board, and ultimately that artistic director was let go, and the theater now has a new staff. So the sum impact of Amanda's advocacy was not only to protect and shut down our own show, but to change the leadership at the theater, which is pretty profound.
Yeah, he did. He was quite pathological in his, yeah, he did it to many, many people in many shows. So. But
now, does the Guild?
Wrong gal.
Definitely. Amanda Green don't play. Now, does the Guild keep an eye out for these sorts of situations when they come to their attention? Is there I hesitate to use the term, a blacklist, or a list of people who don't respect writers' rights that is out there?
We do have a hotline where people can call and report these infractions, and that can include the playwright, him or herself, or actors in the production. It's a kind of hotline for these infractions. David Lindsay Abair wrote a wonderful flyer for us called Don't Change the Words. And in that flyer, which is now sent out by DPS, it gives information about the hotline, how people can report infractions to us. It's challenging, of course, and it's the problem is it places the onus on the artists themselves to report it when these violations occur, because obviously the Guild does not have the manpower to have feet on the ground in every city, in every theater, but the hotline has proven extraordinarily effective, and you can leave tips anonymously. And that's one way that we're able to police the situation.
I mean, can I just jump in real quick, just to say that we actually don't keep any type of list or blacklist or anything like that. It's really against what we're allowed to do and what we do at the Guild. Just to be super clear on that. You know, you can call the hotline. You can let us know what's happening. And if somebody were to call and say, hey, what happened to Amanda, we can let them know what happened to
Okay.
Amanda if Amanda wanted us to let them know. And we could also update them that, well, the leadership has changed, so maybe it's okay now. So we do provide a lot of information, but we don't keep any lists. I don't want to leave any lingering doubts. Yeah.
And I just wanted to know, is there some way to people report or how to find out what's happening out there?
I mean, when it happens, we urge all Dramatist Guild members to be vocal and to reach out to the Dramatist Guild and know what your rights are, and definitely reach out to the Dramatist Guild if you have any doubt about what's going on. And you know, there's always an informal pipeline among dramatists who will be like, hey, so-and-so's interested in my work. What do you work with them? What was that like? You know, that kind of thing goes on all the time. But definitely the Dramatist Guild is a wonderful resource if you're feeling like something is not kosher.
Yes, indeed. I was going to ask Doug, you look like you're getting ready to say something.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. I was just going to say, if it's useful, I have an example of when this can work, of a positive experience. We all have
After my last bummer. Let's bring it up.
But I had a remarkable experience at the Longworth Theater, which just last season decided to mount a production of my play, I Am My Own Wife, which deals with the life of a transgender citizen in Berlin at the time of World War II. And this particular production, they had a design team and a cast and a support staff that was entirely trans people working on the play. And so they reached out to me and they said, you know, in the 15 years since you wrote this play, there's been a lot of advocacy and on behalf of trans people, and some of the vocabulary around the trans experience has changed. And there are moments in the play where you regard Charlotta as somehow exotic or the other because of her trans status. And in this cultural moment, those are hitting our ear in an awkward way. So as a community of trans people, can we suggest some small tweaks to the text based on our experience living in the world? And can we incorporate them into our production? And I thought, well, I only stand to be enriched by that conversation, and the play stands to be bettered too. And since I wrote it 15 years ago, the trans community has really stepped forward and announced itself and been clear about its own needs and its own politics. So together with this very smart dramaturg and actor and director, we went through the whole text and made minor changes, but changes that really spoke to that community in a profound way. And that's how it should happen. The theater or director should reach out to you. They should initiate the conversation. You should be a part of that decision-making. And it can be a really rich experience to revisit your play in another moment and see how the smallest changes can make it richer. And even with Hands on a Hard Body, there were countless times when Amanda and I would get requests that would say, you know, we know this character is Latinx. We don't have a Latinx woman who can hit those notes, but we have this fantastic African-American woman who would be brilliant in the role. Do you mind if we change the ethnicity of the character? And 9 times out of 10, Amanda and I would say, absolutely, use the performer that you most trust. So,
there was like a Christian college who wanted to do it, and we were very happy to, you know, go through and take out language that wouldn't work for their community and stuff. And yeah, always happy to do that kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
It sounds like it really is a question of respect for your copyright and for your craft as a writer, to say that if we want to make changes, we need to find out and get permission and make sure we're doing them in the best way that suits the author's needs and the work's needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a playwright, as you know, your goal is always to be produced and to say yes whenever possible, and to help people have the best experience doing your show and seeing your show. So.
Oh yes, indeed. I'm very willing to change lyrics, to change voices, to change character types as it works in context of the work, because we want it to be out there. And if we don't want actors or audiences to be uncomfortable because somebody can't hit a note or something like that. So yes. So thinking back to, yeah, now Doug, I'm putting my legal hat on for a moment here. When the trans dramaturg, etc., when the trans company, they suggested changes to I Am My Own Wife, did you then incorporate those changes into the ongoing script or just for that production?
I did it just for that particular production, which just happened last spring before COVID hit. But it has led me to consider making the changes in a more permanent way. I haven't done that yet, but because the script celebrates a trans person, I want to make sure that the script is always welcomed in that community. So if there are hiccups in it, I do think it's in my best interest to address them. So I may find that I make those in a more permanent way.
Thank you. Now, have you been, other than the incidents that you have mentioned, have you been confronted with requests to change your work, either one of you, that you have balked at? And what has happened in those situations?
I have on occasion. I have an interesting attitude about it. I mean, I feel like particularly with I Am My Own Wife, because it is a one-person show, I'm frequently asked if I will permit multi-cast productions, like companies to do it, of everywhere from 2 to 20 actors. And because the play I was very, very fortunate with that particular show, and it enjoyed a nice run on Broadway, and its reputation was more or less established. And because of that, I'm at a point now where the play isn't judged anymore. People kind of assume the play might be a fairly reliable script, a fairly good script, thank goodness. There seems to be a consensus around that. And so it's usually productions that are taken to task critically. And so I tend to be fairly liberal if they make a good case for it and say, sure. And I know that the company will either live or die by the choices that they make, but I know that the long-term reputation of the play won't be injured. So if it's a compelling reason and they make a good case, I tend to be pretty generous about it and say yes. I'm actually much more critical of people that want to make cuts or initiate any rewrites. I tend to be more flexible on the casting front than the text front.
Thank you.
I mean, the high fidelity, the example I just gave you is one where I ended up objecting to that. And I mean, I will say, by the way, that the Guild was very helpful to me and wrote this producer a very strong letter and told him in no uncertain terms what he had done. But as I said, we decided not to go ahead and do the ultimate of closing down the production. But I think now I would be less inclined, maybe, if I didn't know the theater at all or the players at all or the person, as I didn't in this situation. I was so excited, and as were the other writers, that a production was happening, that it all happened too fast for us to really do any due diligence. And it was always like, oh, but we're starting in 2 weeks, so we can't, so I might, if someone asked for carte blanche to do rewrites and they had a production that was so imminent, I might have a stronger hand in it earlier, or say, no, you have to do it as written, or do it, so I don't know, we'll see. But I think that you can get into trouble by being so eager for a production to happen that you sort of turn off the warning signals in your head,
Now, if somebody isn't an Amanda Green and isn't a Doug Wright, and they find this happening with their work, what can or should they do?
Same thing. I mean, you are looking at, as far as Amanda Green is concerned, being an Amanda Green is not that impressive. So, everybody has the same amount of power, which is total control over your work at all times, at any stage, right?
Yes, and we also find that a lot of these breaches occur in, I'm sorry to say, academic communities. So our copyright committee works very closely in hand with our education committee, because we feel like if students are taught when they're studying the theater about the basic etiquette around play production and how you serve the author, how you don't make changes without their permission. Then they'll go forward in the professional sphere with a greater awareness. And sadly, a lot of the people most responsible for perpetuating sloppy habits are professors. So we have started a campaign to really educate college theater departments about proper protocol. And that's a huge effort that the Guild has undertaken recently.
That's very interesting, Doug. Why do you think that professors of all people would seem to be not as respectful of the writer's craft, of the writer's rights?
It's shocking to me, actually, and I wish I had a ready answer. I think part of it has to do with they are often dealing with specific student populations, and they have to adjust the play to fit the cast that they can scrounge together. Other times they're doing plays in, say, competitions where they have to be whittled down to a 40-minute running time, or they have a lot of girl students and not enough boys, so they need to do some cross-gender casting. I think part of it is probably just the challenge of creating theater in a college environment. But above and beyond that too, I think perhaps a lot of them who are working in academic communities are sort of king and queens in their own fiefdoms, and no one's really looking over their shoulder, and they can get away with it. So we're working hard to push back on that habit.
I think I recall some years ago, I think it was a student production of Chicago or the like that was unauthorized, and there was a lot of pressure put on, we'll allow it because the kids worked so hard. Dump it back, the guilt on the writer.
No, it's true. And if the kids are working that hard, then it's really up to the administration to go through the proper protocols and get permission to do the play. Otherwise, they're doing a terrible disservice to their own students.
Very true. So looking at the time here, I don't know if we have started to get questions in or if we should just keep talking.
We do. I can jump into some questions and you can see what you think. The first question has to do with actually improvisations. And this individual is asking, well, if there's a portion of the play or musical, like a dance break, they're saying, where improvisations occur or are encouraged, and they happen to be the same every night, and it starts to appear as though it's text, is that something, you know, I guess what reaction would there be in that situation where it's like improv becoming what feels to be text written by the author?
That's interesting. Is it clear in the I wonder if it's clear in the context of the show that this is improv, or if an audience member would think that that's a part of the show. That's interesting.
Well, I think that's the question. Is sometimes when actors are just improving because there's a space in the in that you know, in that scene or whatnot. Is that something that should be protested?
Protested by the
author, I suppose.
Oh, protested by the author in terms of, you mean in a premiere production? I mean, or in a.
You know what? It's not if you want to write back in and ask that question in a different way, maybe we can get a.
I mean, unless it's, I mean, you have written a whole paper about devised theater, unless you are setting out to write something where there's an agreement on all sides about who is the author and who isn't. Generally, if you're like going like, yeah, go Charles, and a dance number, and even if you say it 10 times in a row, it's still the author owns the show. You know,
yes,
you are not a co-author.
Right.
That would be true. And you know, there are some times when people will write in and there's like a little audience byplay at this point. Maybe when there's a crossover or something like that, the actor talks to audience. And that's still within the world of the play. So that still is, yes, the author, the actor may improv it, but it still becomes then the author's work.
Okay, here's another question, which maybe will have an easier answer. So this person is asking if the composer has approval rights over the arrangements and the orchestrations, and what happens if the composer doesn't like those arrangements and orchestrations. Does the author have the right to say no?
Yeah, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have approval over who will be orchestrating your show and who will be doing the arrangements. In my experience, I worked with the orchestrator who in this show where I was a co-composer was Trey Ostasio, and the vocal arranger who was another person, Carmel Dean. And she and I would go back and forth, and she'd bring something in. I'd say like, I'd thin this line here, or do, you know. So it was in a healthy relationship, it is a back and forth until the author and the orchestrator / arranger go, yep, that's good. That's what we like.
I would think, as you said, that would be something that would be set out in the contract to determine who is in charge of who has the decision-making process, who has the approvals.
And I think that's something you have to, and Amanda, you know, obviously better than I do, because I don't, you know, I'm not writing anything, but, you know, you have approval always over the individual in the contract. I often will see, I have approval over the orchestrator, I have approval over the, you know, arranger, but that relationship and how that looks in the room is something that is unique, I think, at times, depending on the collaboration. And you have to be careful to pick the right person, I would think, so that you're having a dialogue and figure out how to talk with that person.
Yes. And I guess, and you can have it written in the contract that you have the final authority over, you know, final approval over the orchestrations and the vocal arrangements. That can be something you put in the contract. Isn't that right? I mean,
yeah, for sure. I mean, I say, you know, can't hurt, right? I mean, the more you have on your side, the better.
yes.
This next question I'm just going to answer really quickly, which is they're asking if the Guild ever finds people, or maybe Doug, you can answer this. You're the president. Does the Guild ever find people who infringe on works?
I don't believe we impose a fine structure. I believe we either demand that they restore the text, or we close the production, or we initiate legal action. So I don't think that there's a fine structure in place.
No, and actually we wouldn't really do that anyway, because we're not a union, so we're not as involved in that sort of blacklisting, demanding how people run their business. We certainly wouldn't recommend that the rest of our members work with that company if it's not working out, but you know, we kind of let the market decide who's victorious. This person is asking if there's a best practices, or if you guys could recommend best practices for playwrights, authors, and composers to find out, to try to avoid the situations that you're kind of describing. And what are the best practices? What are the things you can think about before saying, you know, engaging with somebody, I suppose, in a premiere production, you know, to set the path in the right direction? What would you advise?
Certainly familiarity with the Guild's Playwrights Bill of Rights, which is all over our website and easily downloadable there. You should familiarize yourself with it. And if you don't know the company, you can even familiarize them with it. I think if someone is, like Amanda was describing a situation where she had all of 2 weeks to make a decision, that instantly sends up a red flag, right? Whereas when a theater has just announced a new season, you're maybe third in the season, and in the previous spring they say, we were thinking of doing this with your text, or we were thinking of casting this way, or we wanted to use multiple actors in that role, then that's a theater that's approaching you in a timely way about changes they'd like to make, and that's a discussion you can welcome and use your own discretion about. But last minute consultation, frenzied phone calls, things like that are all serious indicators that perhaps something is awry.
I love what you said too, Deb, about no matter what level. I mean, that's like that's a pretty high level. If you're doing something with, you know, that has a season and has the wherewithal, I mean, no matter what production, I mean, it's almost like a dating bill of rights when you go like, this is what I will stand for, and this is what I won't. I mean, just saying, I'm thrilled you want to do my piece. I want you to know that I very much believe in the Dramatists Guild Bill of Rights, and here's a copy of it. And if you're good with that, then I think we'll have a great relationship, you know, that kind of thing. It's a good place to start, maybe, you know.
This individual is asking if the guild would help if the production isn't under a DG contract, which of course we don't really have. You know, we're not a union, so we don't have, you know, contracts and tiers and things like that. So would the DG still help? Absolutely. The DG will help anyone who is a member, and sometimes even people that aren't members get lucky too, because ultimately we care mostly about the playwrights. But this person's also asking, is there nothing we can do short of taking our football and going home? You know, so when you're in that and the producer's saying, you want to shut it down, shut it down, otherwise we're making those changes. Is there, you know, what are sort of the maybe strategies one can employ when you're kind of faced with someone who's giving you an ultimatum?
Tears, tantrums. No, I'm just kidding. No, honestly, a strongly worded, letter from Ralph, you know, or you, or that they definitely. I mean, this guy was in that particular situation. They were never going to be fair deal players, but it improved. It improved from what it was, and they were threatened. You know what I mean? Ralph was like, well, you know, we're sending your name out to our 7,000 members, so they'll know about you. And, you know, I mean, so there are, I don't mean threatened in a mafia kind of way, but there was muscle behind the Dramatists Guild, and knowing that your reputation is on the line, even if we're not shutting your production down, is a deterrent.
And I think that's one of the beauties of the Guild is we're not individual playwrights. We are part of an organization that does have muscle, and that does have power, and that does have press that goes out there. So I think that's one thing that is a tremendous advantage and a beauty of the Guild.
And every time a playwright reports an infraction, they're actually doing it to their own betterment, but they're also doing it to the betterment of every other writer in the field. It helps all of us. And I would say, just in reference to that last question, if a theater is saying, you either let us make wholesale changes to your text without your permission, or we won't do the show, as desperate as we all are for productions of our work, I think that's a very serious red flag, and I would question anyone that wanted to move forward with that particular producer or theater.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna, I was also going to throw in, because we were talking about what the Guild does do. You could go ahead and read some of the published statements, the biz blips that the Business Affairs Department had sent in the past, and I think we actually sent one about the incident in Texas as well. I think it did go out to all of our membership, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know the sequence, but I know that went out. So you guys can all read that and see what that looks like. Here we are with, there's so many questions. Oh, here's an interesting one about stage directions. So this person's asking, to what extent does the stage direction fall under the author's jurisdiction? They're often taken as suggestions rather than musts. I understand, you know, it's understandable if there's a different sort of vision, but what's the link with the stage direction? What's up with stage directions is the question.
I think the Guild has a statement or two on this itself, doesn't it, Deborah? About whether or not the ownership interest in stage directions?
I mean, the stage directions are considered part of the script. And when we have a proper script approval clause in the contract, it'll say no changes to the text, title, or stage direction. I don't know, has it ever come up where somebody's written one of you to say that the stage directions don't work? I don't know if people are that conscientious.
I don't know how my fellow writers, Cheryl and Amanda, feel. But I always think I bring latitude to the stage directions, because of course what you most want is for actors to find the honest moment in the writing and play it as fully and richly as they can. And sometimes that means they follow the stage direction to the letter, and sometimes it means they come up with their own solution in the proper spirit. but it's like instead of crossing left and picking up a drink, to cross right and pick up a cigarette, well, you know, maybe that's all right. And maybe the actor is still achieving the emotional moment that the scene requires. You know, that's a far cry from the action stops, the living room splits open, and a great white whale rises from the floor. I mean, if that's not in your play and that happens on the stage, chances are you have a serious beef with the producing theater. So I think it's a matter of relativity when it comes to stage directions and up to each artist's discretion, but technically the playwright holds copyright.
And I feel, correct me also, that like in olden times or in older scripts, I mean, you would get sort of almost even the stage manager's copy where it does say, Gwendolyn, how wonderful to see you. She puts down her teacup and, you know, pats her, you know, mouth with the, you know, whatever, handkerchief. But these days, I feel like they are much more intentional stage directions, and they are much more of the stage splits open and a whale pops out variety when they're written. So they seem, and there are stage directions and stage directions, as Doug says, but you do technically, you know, have copyrights overall.
Yeah. And I've actually worked with directors who said that, oh, they pretty much ignore they cross out what the writer has written in by way of stage direction. Say, I'm going to stage it myself. And then sometimes that will work. And sometimes if you cross out a stage direction, because when I write stage directions, I usually have stuff in there that I need to get done. So you cross that out and then you're wondering, how do we get from here to there? It's like, unblack off the stage direction and I'll tell you how this was supposed to have been accomplished.
Yeah.
I have one question here asking about conceivers. One of my favorite words. So when somebody else has come up with the idea, you know, and it's maybe a little bit off making changes, right? But I suppose what's that person's right as you move forward? And I can tell you, it's, you know, as an idea and a suggestion, and ideas and suggestions aren't protected under copyright law. So you have to look at that too, so that person doesn't automatically get a say in what we're talking about, right? They don't get to then make changes to your script or have any part of it. I'm seeing a lot of questions about don't change the words, which is our hotline for reporting infractions. So changes, if you see changes in your community, you can call a 1-855-71-WORDS, and that's the don't change the words hotline. And you can also call the DG, call the DG office or call us through our help desk as well. Everyone will help you. So call anywhere, just call. I think we've kind of touched on most of the things that are here in the chat. And I'm sorry if I've missed some of your questions. I'm just trying to keep them on topic. But I would welcome you, if your question didn't get answered, to write to me at the help desk and I will get back to you. I just don't want to take us too far off of topic. So if you've got any general copyright questions about registration and all of that, please write in. I'm not ignoring you. Just don't want to veer us too far off topic, but I think that is all I have at the moment.
I'm a bit curious to know if, as a lawyer with expertise in that area, and also as a playwright with real expertise in our craft, Cheryl, have you ever experienced these issues?
As a baby writer, yes, I have. And I am ashamed and hasten to admit that I allowed, this happened to me once. And I came in and I was appalled at what had been done with my show. People had changed names of characters, they changed action. There was like your standard little 10-minute off black box stuff. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And it was another one of those, it's closing next weekend. What are you going to do? Are you going to shut down a production with all of these off-Broadway people? So I was like, no, I just bit my tongue really hard and said, okay, this is not happening to me again. And I make a point of what I'm keeping involved in the rehearsal process, and people need to tell me if they're going to change stuff, and if they don't, then I I do get very antsy about that. And I say, you cannot change anything without my permission. And I think also being a lawyer, that may help keep them in line a little bit.
I think that the key thing I want everyone to remember too is, I mean, we've got Doug and Amanda here and Cheryl, and you know, they're all established, but it's everyone's going through similar things, and everyone has the same recourse. And the important thing is to get a little brave in because it is hard to say, no, you can't, and I'm disappointing all these people. So it's very emotional, I think, right? When you say in the moment, like you're gripping your you know, your producer's hand. Why are you gripping? Because it's that, like, what is going on? You know, so just to also remember that we're all on the same team, at least at the Guild, and we're all there to help you, and the same recourses are available to everyone. And it's about, when are you going to stand up for what you've written too, you know.
I have an interesting little anecdote that, that if you don't mind, Deborah, I'll share briefly. And it just illustrates the primacy of copyright in the theater and why, as playwrights, it's so critical for us. And I remember I had written a play in 1995 called Quills. And the play was produced at the New York Theater Workshop with, happily, some positive response, and ultimately was optioned by the movies. And I was given the task of authoring the screenplay, which was a great thrill. And so I started to adapt my own play for film. And the film was ultimately produced and released. And then later, theaters still wanted to do the play. And I remember thinking, wow, you know, when I wrote the movie, I found this wonderful new human moment between these two characters that played really well. I'd love to introduce that into the play now. So when theaters do the play, that same exchange is there and makes the play that much richer. I could not do so because the screenplay was copyright 20th Century Fox. So even though I had conceived the story, invented many of the characters, created all of their dialogue, in both instances, I owned one text and did not own the other. So I could not take material I wrote for the film and interpolate it into the play. And I always think that's a fascinating circumstance. And for me, you know, it kills me that, I'm a devoted member of the Writers Guild, and I'm thrilled to work in mediums other than the theater, to be sure. But, you know, it is amazing to me that authorship on a film, at the end of the day, and accreditation in the credits for having written it, is determined by a WGA committee, because so often so many different writers have had their hands in the pot creating the screenplay. It actually takes a triumvirate of their peers making judgment about who contributed 33.33% of the text. And so for me, when it says by so-and-so, it means it's an extension of your heart. It has your intellect in it. It has your blood flowing through it because you gave birth to it in the purest, most imaginative way. And so, of course, it's an extension of you. Of course you own it. But in film, that's not the case at all. You're just a craftsman hired in a row of craftsmen to create 120 pages that a director and his cast can use in shooting. So the two professions could not be more different. And I would not feel like a true author, and I would not call myself an author unless I was a playwright, because in a screenplay, you never know who wrote what.
Thank you so much, Doug, for pointing out that key difference. In fact, the fact that you were the writer of both of them is incredible. I think that's not as often the case, I don't think, but wow.
Wonderful.
But so, let's see.
I think with that, I mean, I don't have any more people are asking how to connect with us. So of course, help desk is the best way to connect to me. I'm usually always on the help desk because now it's on my phone. So you are always with me. So that's how you connect to me if you have any questions. But thank you so much, Cheryl and Amanda and Doug, for this hour of your time to tell us, like, sharing your stories, not always pleasant stories, but I think stories that do need to be told. And you know, we're all in it together. So feel good in that. I think the response from the chat is an immense amount of gratitude to all of you, and I echo that myself. So thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next panel. I believe, I don't want to say the wrong date, but we have a panel with the Copyright Office coming up, and then next week on the 30th, I'll be hosting another panel on music rights, and we're going to talk about, oh gosh, the music industry and how those songs, when they're not on the stage, what do you do with them? So that'll be a whole interesting other topic, but I hope you will join us. Otherwise, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Cheryl, Amanda, and Doug.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you,
Take care.
Sharon.